Hi everyone, it's me, Darlene. We are ready to do another quilt block for the Quilt Block Party. If you are new to this series, I will have a link to the playlist below. I am just making 20 cohesive quilt blocks. By watching these quilt block videos, it will give you ideas of different ways that you can make blocks, and you are free to do whatever you want with your creations. I just want to show you guys that when you work on quilt blocks that you're not really sure what you're going to do with them, but you want them to be cohesive, meaning that they look like they belong together, pick out a bunch of fabrics and put them in a basket, and then only pick from those fabrics, because then you know you're bound to use some of the same fabrics over and over again. And then what I like is I just have everything easy to bring to my table and also to put away. So here's my foundations, and here's all the fabrics that I have been using, and that's what I picked from. Let's talk a second about the foundation, because I got some questions, and I'm going to go over that right now. What we are doing is foundation piecing. I'm using this piece of fabric as a foundation for the quilt block that I'm making, meaning the quilt block will be sewn onto this foundation. It's a typical way to do a crazy quilt because it just makes it so much easier to put your pieces together. It's also a way to make it more stable, like if you want to do a block with a lot of applique and different things like that. This should not be confused with the backing of your block. This is a foundation, not a backing. I just pulled some of the other blocks to show you. That's why we don't care about the color of thread on the back, because this is just a foundation. This is never going to be seen. This isn't a good example because my threads happen to match, but look, I even leave threads all just not even trimmed, because that's just all going to be on the inside of a quilt. Okay, here's one that you can see. I used, well, maybe you can't see too good, but I used more of like an orangey color thread. That'll never be seen. This one has like some blue threads and some orangey thread. And again, I leave loose threads there. When you do foundation piecing, it's a very good time to use up ends of thread that you don't have enough for like a whole project. You can always take spools that have not much thread on them and spin that thread onto a bobbin, and then it doesn't take up as much room, and you can just use this bobbin as your top thread. For foundation piecing, it does not matter what the top thread color is or the bottom thread color is. They will not show unless we are doing something with top stitching, as in the form of an applique, and in that case the top thread matters. So what ends up happening with these blocks is somebody can put them together any way they want, with sashing or without sashing, doesn't matter. It's going to be up to whoever ends up with these blocks to decide. They can make their entire quilt top, then they can back the entire quilt with batting, and then put a backing on that. Because someone wanted to know, why wasn't I putting batting between the fabric and what they thought was the backing? It's because this is just the top of a quilt block. It's not a quilt as you go project at this point. So you can put all the blocks together and then make a sandwich with your quilt top, batting, and a backing. Or if you don't want to do a whole quilt all at once like that, you can certainly use these in quilt as you go projects. You would just cut a backing and make a sandwich with your top block, batting, and your backing. And then you could quilt each block, and then you can join those blocks with any quilt as you go method that you prefer. So just to clear that up, big difference between a foundation and a backing. So let me take my foundation piece. Your foundation piece, it doesn't matter what kind of fabric you use. No one's going to see it. I do suggest that you wash your fabric first and dry it, so if there's any shrinking that's going to happen, it will happen before you start your project. And then also remember, of course, that the thickness of your foundation will have a lot to do with the weight of the finished product. I have thought for about 5 minutes as to what I would like to do for a block. And I mean that because Sandy Pro and I just chatted by phone, and she asked me if I had any idea, and I was like, not really. And now I do. I am going to try a very typical crazy quilt block where I'm going to lay one center piece, but I'm going to have it be not centered, but off center, and then I'm going to build around it just like we do with regular crazy quilting. But what I'm going to do is the sides that are close to the edges, I'm going to do little narrow strips of fabric, and then the sides that are far from the edges, I'm going to go wider, just to see what kind of optical illusion that might create. Huh? It's worth a try. I think so. When you want to make separate blocks and make sure they're cohesive, pick at least one or even two of the fabrics in your pile and make sure that they go in every single block. I picked just one, the blue gingham, so I make sure that the blue gingham shows up at least once in every block. I'm going to make this a four-sided center. I'm going to make it wonky because you know I like wonky. So there's 1, 2, 3, I just need one more side. Let's just do it this way. And as I said, I'm going to make it very off-center, and I'm going to build narrow pieces this side and this side, and then I'm going to do wider pieces here and here. Let's start here at the top with something narrow. This is a very good way to get rid of smaller scraps. So I'm going to do, let's start with this guy right here. I'm already loving it. So I'm just going to put these two right sides together, and I'm going to go stitch right there. Now I'm going to go press this down to set it, and then I will open it and press. Now I'm going to just trim off my edges here to make them match my line. And you don't even really have to do that. You can always just sew over those. All right, now we're going on strip number 2. Do I dare go with the pink satin that gives me such a hard time? Now this is pretty wide, but this is a very slinky fabric, so I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. I am going to start like that, just like usual. I'm going to go sew down this line. You can see that my pink is wide. I am leaving it like this. I don't want to trim it narrow because it makes it harder to sew, especially when something is slippery. So I'm going to be leaving it wide, and I will just be sewing on it in a way to make it narrow. I'll show you that when we come back around to that piece. Right now we're working on this strip. Now I happen to have sewn too far, so my pink is sewn down, so I can't just easily trim it. So I'm just leaving it there. I just know that I need the next strip to cover that, so I'm going to just put it like this and just make sure I sew all the way across. And this piece I will be leaving wide. When you trim, always make sure you do not cut your foundation underneath. Okay, we're working on here now. And I do want this piece wide, but not maybe quite this wide. I'm going to go in and trim it. And let's maybe go like this. Okay, now we're working here, and we're going to be doing a thin line here. When you do thin lines, you don't want to be dealing with stretchy fabric. Of course, you can always add a fusing to the back. Let's do a nice little thin piece of this stuff. I'm going to trim it just to make it not so much overhang. And this is not difficult fabric, so I am going to make it somewhat smaller. Now you can see that there's not much left here. When I sew down, when I sew this with that seam allowance, when I flip that back, it's going to make just a little piece showing, and that's very cute in a crazy quilt block. Now you can see that the piece that we had originally is very tiny now. And I'm going to leave this one wide also, but when I come back, I will be putting my fabric closer to make each piece narrow. It'll make more sense as we go. Well, it's going to start to make sense right now because we're going to work on this pink. We want this pink piece to be narrow. So whatever fabric I take, I want to stitch closer to here. So I'm going to put my fabric down like that, and I'm not putting it to the edge, and I'm going to stitch down here. And then when we turn it over, there'll be just a little bit of pink showing. I forgot the camera, but same old, I just stitched it. You can see that I did not put my fabric to the line. I put it in so that when I flip it, only a little bit of pink is going to show. Pretty cool, huh? Now again, we're going to want something narrow here, but this fabric, I don't need to leave it all. It's not slinky, so I will trim it without cutting my foundation. And the reason I'm trimming it is because I can save this for another part of the quilt block. Now we're over here. Just gonna cut a piece that I know is going to be long enough. I'm going to like that very much. And this is what we have. And I can trim here. I can trim this off. I can trim my overhang. And I think I like the width of that piece, so I'm going to leave it. I also want a wide piece now coming off here. I'll do that. And I forgot to show you again. Now I'm going to have this be a wide piece, but not this wide. Which way do I want to go with it? Let's just do this. Now we are back to doing a narrow strip, and I'll show you how to do that. I took a little break, not exactly sure where we left off, but I can tell by my block that we are doing this one next, and we are going to make it narrow. I'm just going with all kinds of prints today. That will be long enough, like that. So I'm going to just go ahead and sew, and then I'll come back and trim. Now once again, I want my blue to be narrow, so maybe like that, or maybe like that. I think that looks good. And we have this, and I will go ahead and trim. And once again, we're going to do something narrow here. I think I'm going to go with this blue. Oh, but this has to be longer. Not long enough. This is long enough. I forgot. I think this is the third time in this one video. I'm going to use this as an example of what you can do if you're not thrilled about something. This is actually wider than I would like. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this back, and I'm going to sew again to the left of that stitch line that I already did. It doesn't matter. I don't have to take anything apart. I'm just going to sew more to the left just to narrow this down some more. Okay, you can see that I made it a little narrower. Here are my 2 stitch lines. I'm just leaving that as is. I could have even gone more narrow. You know, sometimes when you're making a crazy quilt block, if you have some big pieces, sometimes it's cool to just stick some pieces in that are just about 1/4 of an inch wide. It really looks neat. It's like you added piping in your block. Now, we're working here and we're working wide. I already have this one right here, but I think I want to repeat it. I like to do wild and crazy things like that. Well, I was off camera, but I trimmed this. Do like. Now, this piece of satin, let's put another piece of satin here. I'm sure I have more of that dreaded satin. Now we're back to a skinny part. Going with that. We will be finishing up on this side. Let's do some blue gingham. This will be long enough. I just need to even it out. And since we're going over the edge, I'm just going to turn it over to trim. Pretty cool. Okay, now we're going back this way, and we will finish this one off. And once again, since we're past the edge, we're just going to flip and trim. We have finished the sides with the big pieces, so now we're just going to work on finishing both of these sides with the narrow strips. Almost forgot. Let's do that. At this point, it doesn't matter if we just go ahead and finish up this corner, then we can go finish up this one. So I'm going to do this next. Piece of gingham. Let's do maybe 2 more. Let's do a little piece of this pink, like that. And I'm just going to finish it off with this pink. So I'm just going to trim. Let's finish this side. There. And I forgot once again. I'm going to just go ahead and finish this up because I'm getting very forgetful with the camera. I finished it off camera because I kept forgetting to turn on the camera. It is way more time consuming when you do narrow rows like that because it takes that many more rows. I'm going to go ahead and flip this and trim it to 13 inches square. And let's see what we have. I love it. This is the way I was looking at it. I just think it is so cool. Now it does get a little thicker and heavier here because you're sewing on top of layers of fabric, but that's all good. I just really like how that came out. This would be the perfect spot to put a flower or a bird or just some buttons and ribbon, anything you want. I don't think I will be embellishing these blocks. I wanted to, but there's just going to be too many of them. I'll do another series of embellishing, I promise. I am going to go ahead and take pictures of this for you to see up close. I thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe so you can see the rest of this series and the rest of all the other craziness that I bring you. Bye!
Only 12 more blocks to go for this series. Whose idea was this? You can make me feel better by subscribing if you haven't yet. Thanks.